As many?
Madam President, it is truly an honor and privilege to once again stand before you in this honorable chamber. I wish to thank our Father, which art in heaven, and who ought to be ever present and mindful in our hearts and thoughts, the ever so merciful and divine Creator, for allowing me to be here to make a meaningful contribution and to assist in reviewing, amending, and passing laws that are in the best interests of our Bahamian people. The legislation that we are currently debating is long overdue and is a part of the administration's program for transforming the country's political culture while simultaneously reforming the culture of governance. This legislation is also one of the several commitments this administration made to the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and foreshadowed in the speech of the throne that have already been brought to fruition just 6 months into our tenure as the government of the Bahamas. It also represents part of the government's mission to create a new architecture style of governance that will lead to modernization and reform in areas such as the promotion of transparency and accountability in all areas of government, from the awarding of contracts to incentives for investors, public finance, policy planning and implementation, combating official corruption, and the efficient delivery of public service. To quote the country's leader, Dr. the Honorable Hubert Alexander Minnis, this legislation deepens democracy in the Bahamas and advances the liberty of citizens and basic justice, end quote. Prime Minister Minnis further went on to say that the creation of an independent office of the Director of Public Prosecutions would help to enhance the rule of law in the Bahamas by removing the unnecessary influence of political figures. The FNM was formed out of the struggles for greater accountability and transparency. We on this side cut our teeth in the fight to deliver our country from the political corruption to accountability. The push for the legislation came from the cries of the people, from the Bahamian people from early as 2013. Those cries, for some reasons, were ignored over and over and over again by those who held the seat of power, now opposite. Madam President, as a part of the Free National Movement, Madam President, as a party, the Free National Movement and its leader heard the cries of our people and pledged to hold those persons, wherever they may be in public office, accountable once we are elected to government. I am proud to say that this is now 2017, and 6 months following the general elections, we are delivering on that promise by introducing the bill to amend the Constitution to provide the establishment of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and for matters that connected thereto, also known as the Constitution Bill 2017, now the Constitution Act 2017, as it was passed in the lower chambers of the Parliament. Madam President, I place my wholehearted support behind this legislation because for far too long, we have had elected officials and public servants engage in corrupt practices only to see that nothing never comes out of it. Those types of things can erode public confidence in our system and our officials, much of to the detriment of our processes and the country itself. Thank you. Madam President, we did not find ourselves here overnight, but the reality is that the greed and selfish ways that some individuals have displayed has done more harm than good for the moral conscience of our people and the country's image on the international stage. When we look at how other global countries are dealing with corruption, we must be true to ourselves and admit that we are far behind in this regard. Thankfully, we now have a government that is not all talk, but displays positive actions. This action-driven government is laying the framework and foundation for a new and better Bahamas where transparency and accountability are the order of the day. Madam President, allow me a short time to briefly describe the journey that got us to this point. The first Constitution Commission, which was held by the People's Government, suggested that there be an amendment to the Constitution to provide for an independent prosecutor, and even the second one yes, the second one held by those opposite, agreed that we should allow criminal matters to be dealt with by the office of an independent prosecutor. Surprisingly, well, interestingly, my research also discovered that the Bahamas Bar Association also talked about this issue and agreed that we should have one in place. Madam President, the establishment of an independent director of public prosecutions will prevent matters such as what happened in Mayaguana back in 2015 when a former MP for the constituency, who was also a sitting cabinet minister responsible for local government, called a sitting administrator. The then mentioned minister was the administrator's boss at the time, asked him to release a man on bail despite being already convicted and sentenced and was not...
The chair acknowledges Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell on a point of order.
Yes. I just would like him to, there's no evidence that the minister, no evidence.
That was in the public domain.
No, sir.
That was in the public domain.
The minister went to great lengths to explain what his conduct was, and it's not about directing anybody what to do.
But he
Yeah.
said he called him. He just said.
I'm saying your allegation is that the minister directed the release of someone, and I'm saying the minister denied that on the record. So I don't want it to go in on the record that any minister of the government directed anybody to do anything. Not as far as the judiciary is concerned.
Senator, I would
Okay.
suggest you rephrase that.
Not a problem, Madam President. Okay.
Senator?
When a former MP for the constituency allegedly called a sitting local administrator, who also acted in the capacity as a local magistrate, to release a young man who was already convicted and sentenced and was just waiting to be transferred to a Magistrates Correctional Center. The then minister publicly and blatantly denied these allegations, claiming that the FNM was on a witch hunt and grasping for political life. Colleagues, the action-driven FNM called on the Office of the Attorney General to conduct an independent and impartial investigation on this matter. After more evidence started to come to light courtesy of the media and social media, the action-led FNM held repeated demonstrations, which then forced the then minister to admit later on that he had indeed had communications with the administrator. The government at that time did nothing and said nothing on this matter, despite the mountainous calls from the Bahamian people for that cabinet minister to resign both his seat in cabinet and as an MP. They saw nothing wrong with it, Madam President. In fact, they allowed him to stay in cabinet as a full minister. In my view, as a young Bahamian, being new on the scene, and I believe the Bahamian people will agree with me when I say this, that the then Attorney General dropped the ball intentionally and missed a golden opportunity to display the rule of law as entrenched in our Constitution. Madam President, if we did have an independent prosecutor who was protected by such an amendment of the Constitution to do their job by being firm, transparent, and accountable in place, then possibly, this may not have happened. And if it had occurred, then we know the rule of law would have kicked in and justice would have been demonstrated. This is why this amendment is needed, and this is why this action-driven administration is ensuring that this comes to light. Another incident that took place in our country in recent years is when the former administration nollied the case of two foreigners who were being held after they were suspected of smuggling weapons into the country, despite the country being burdened already by illegal weapons entering our shores. The foreign individuals, who were represented by the former Attorney General prior to her taking office as Attorney General, and
Right, to interrupt this matter.
Excuse me,
Yeah, sorry.
Senator Mitchell, it's a point of order. Can you just give me
The point of order is, again, misleading what the facts are on this position. Last week, in the other place, the same allegation was made, which caused the former Attorney General to issue a statement stating what the facts are with regard to her involvement with these folk that he's making the allegation on. And she was not the attorney for these individuals.
Chair acknowledges Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you. The former Attorney General did publicly accept that she appeared for them on their first arraignment. Now, whether that meant that she continued to be their attorney, there's no evidence on that. But she herself said she appeared for them on their first arraignment. I know from information received that the matter had gone long beyond that at the time the Nolly was entered.
Senator Moss? I would just like to make sure we just caution all senators, that when we're speaking on these legal matters, that we really have the facts and we choose our language appropriately.
Madam President, I'm looking right now, thank God for technology. I'm looking at The Guardian, November 7, 2017, where the former Attorney General said, I only represent the Hayes at their arrangement. But then arraignment. So I'm just saying that she did have some type of relationship with them before she became before Attorney General, and that's what I'm saying. No.
Okay, Senator Moss, continue with your presentation, and please remember, senators, you should be directed to the chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Lord. Thank you. Like I was saying, the foreign individuals who were represented by the former Attorney General prior to her taking office as Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs was able to get a nollie after it was discovered that the Attorney General pulled a modern-day Jerry Roker on the Bahamian people and reportedly secretly went on some type of vacation out of this country. Also, it was reported by the Minister of State. That's my opinion. It was also revealed by the Minister of State that time for the Attorney General office, who said that, he got some information that he had to go travel to one seminar, only to find out the seminar didn't make no sense for him to travel, and he was trying to figure out why was he sent off at the same time as the Attorney General. But that's something we have to ask. The acting Attorney General at that time, who was also the former sitting Minister of Education, carried out the order to nollie the individuals despite a comprehensive Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation.
Now, please.
Yes, I mean, that is my point, madam. The Attorney General acts in his own deliberate judgment, whoever's sitting in that seat. Where's the evidence that he carried out some order or instruction? Where?
I'm reading the paper. I got this in the paper.
Senator Moss, let's move on, and again, let's be very
Madam President,
careful here.
it was reported. It was reported in one of the dailies that the acting Attorney General at that time, who was also the former sitting Minister of Education, carried out the order to nollie the individuals despite. Okay.
Madam President, I have to object to this line of.
Excuse me, General Moss, please withdraw that.
I withdrew.
Yeah.
I'll move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Calls were made to the former government by the Bahamian people, but we as a people were ignored until the action-driven FNM started beating the drums, led a protest and demanded answers to clarify why the PLB government dropped all the charges. The acting Attorney General responded in a very disrespectful manner, and I quote, he said this inside the House of Assembly, I have said it before, and I will say it again. There was advice for the file for which I followed, and at the end of the day, I would do it again, end quote. Madam President, my fellow Bahamians, colleagues, in my view, this foolishness, this kind of blatant disregard for the rule of law must indeed come to an end, and I assure you that this action-driven government is putting measures in place to hold the top of the top, from the Prime Minister straight down to the government worker, accountable to the Bahamian people. The amount of knowledge the government used while in
May I
office.
Point of order, please.
Senator Mitchell, I'm going to let the sit for a moment, Senator. I'm going to let the senator continue, but let me just interject here that, I wish us to pay attention to page 26 in the rules for the Senate, 31.1, where you should not quote from newspapers unless he or she adopts such quotation as his own words and such are relevant to the business under debate. Now, we had an example of that already, Senator Moss. Let's now try to be very careful where we're going. If you do not have the newspaper, you cannot bring these matters forward in the manner in which you have done. So let's move on, but let's be considerate where we are. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell.
The gravamen of my point here is the assertion that the exercise of a discretion violates the rule of law, and that is false. That is false and misleading. The Constitution gives the Attorney General a power. That power is absolute, and he exercises a discretion. That's it. You may disagree with the discretion, but he exercises a discretion. And the Constitution says, subject to no one's influence or order. That's the point I wish to make, that anything that undercuts that and suggests that because the acting minister at the time made a particular decision that somehow that was an abuse, he acted within his discretion.
Point taken, Senator Mitchell. Yeah, please, on the wrap-up. Let's try to get through the afternoon. Senator Moss, please continue. But as I said, you have been warned. I hate to use that word, warned. But advised, cautioned, advised, probably better words. Okay?
The amount of okay. The amount of knowledge the PLP government used while in office was beyond counting on one hand. The perception from the public of abuse seems to be abuse of power. The rule of law is critical to the maintenance of the people's trust in the exercise of public authority. Therefore, according to the speech from the throne, my government will enact legislation to establish the office of an independent director of public prosecutions. In support of this endeavor, certain functions now performed by the Attorney General, such as the power to issue a fiat authorizing the commencement of legal actions in sensitive matters or a nulli, will be transferred to the Director of Public Prosecutions, end quote. Once again, this action-driven administration has delivered on the promise and will put an end to government abusing the nullies like how the cookie jar was abused. This action-driven administration has canvassed other regional territories on how they constituted the office of the independent prosecutor. We have looked at, for example, Barbados and Canada and other territories to inform our experience on the best way forward. Madam President, the role of the independent prosecutor must be seen as an administrator of justice, fair play, and integrity when one is dealing with prosecutions. According to Canada, they expect a great deal from prosecutors who are subject to ethical procedure and constitutional obligations. Traditionally, their role has been regarded as that of a representative of justice rather than a persistent advocate. Their functions are viewed by the public trust. Prosecutors are expected to discharge their duties with fairness, objectivity, and integrity. The role is not to primarily win convictions any time, but to put before the court all available relevant evidence necessary to enable the court to determine the guilt or innocence of an accused. Madam President, in order for the independent prosecutor to be successful, we must give them their tools, independence, and autonomy to perform their job fairly. The Bahamas independent prosecutor will be loved by those who live, pray, and cry for justice. And yes, Madam President, it will also be feared and hated by those who want to continue to reap havoc on our society and finances. The Attorney General shall be responsible for the administration, legal affairs of the Bahamas, and legal proceedings for and against the state shall be taken. In the case of civil proceedings, in the name will fall under the name of the Attorney General. In the case of the criminal proceedings, this will fall under the name of the Director of Prosecutions. The Director of Public Prosecutions of the Bahamas shall be a public office and shall have the power in any case which he considers it desirable so to do, to institute and undertake criminal proceedings against any person before any court in respect of any offense against the law of the Bahamas. So in other words, any criminal proceedings that currently fall in the office of the Attorney General will be transferred and continued by the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions on this day, on this act comes into force without formality. Madam President, what I have also observed is that the office of the DPP will have tenure and allowed to serve for 5 years, and after that, the holder of the office may be appointed to serve another 5 years. Madam President, I have sat with the Attorney General inquiring as to whether this person can be reappointed over and over again. He assured me by telling me no, and highlighted that the provisions being put in place to ensure that this does not happen. Because you see, I was wondering if a person can be appointed now, take a 10-year break, be appointed later on, then take another 5-year break and be appointed again. The Attorney General said to me, no, sir. The most a DPP can serve is 10 years and may not hold the office beyond age 68, whichever earlier. I also brought to the attention of the Attorney General the concerns of the Bahamian people have expressed to me with regard of the amount of power the DPP will have. I asked the Attorney General if this office holder will be a law unto themselves. He told me no. He highlighted in the Article 78B, number 2, that the DPP may be removed from office only for inability to discharge the functions of his office, whether arising from infirmity of body or mind or any other cause, or for misbehavior, and shall not be so removed except in accordance with the provisions of paragraph 5 of this article. He then explained the process to which must be followed. Madam President, fellow senators, my fellow Bahamians, this is good. This is good. Despite a member of the opposition said that this bill is backwards, not well thought of, aggression, and they ain't wait to paper it on, yet they still support it, Madam President. This piece of legislation, this piece of amended legislation that we are presenting to the Bahamian people is a rock-bottom piece of legislation that we can expect change in this new and better Bahamas. Madam President, this action-driven administration is on the ball and not just demonstrating 21st century thinking, but also displaying it. As a young millennial senator, I join many others in congratulating the Bahamas government for doing what is right and what is needed to develop a new and better Bahamas. A government is supposed to be for the people, by the people, and for the people. Biblical scholars say this quote was originally found in the Holy Scripture, which in its full text reads, "The Bible is for the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. How great thou art, O God, how great thou art." Madam President, again, I support this action-driven administration's amendment. Thank you.
As many.
Madam President, it is an honor of mine to stand in these august halls to do the people's business. I am grateful to my God and my government for the opportunity to serve the Bahamian people in this capacity. Today is particularly special for me as a nation. Once again, we pause to commemorate the anniversary of universal suffrage in the Bahamas and the enfranchisement of women under the theme, "Strong Women, Strong Families, Strong Communities." This year being the 55th anniversary of the enfranchisement of women in the Bahamas. As we celebrate, we remember the women who toiled to build this country and those who continue in the fight every single day to build strong families and strong communities in the face of tremendous adversity. We salute the heroines of the women's suffrage movement and know that I speak today for all the ladies in this place when I say that we are indeed humbled by the great legacy that we are now charged to continue. I dare say we do so proudly. This government has clearly demonstrated that the FNM will continue to be the party to fight for the advancement of women and provide a platform for our voice in the Bahamas. This government's commitment to the advancement of women, especially in the area of political participation, is a matter of record. We wear a badge of honor to the fact that it was under the banner of the FNM, the first woman that was elected to the House of Assembly, the Honorable Janet Boswick, and it was our party which placed females in the forefront to the executive to lead such important ministries as the Attorney General's Office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Social Services and Development. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert Minnis, is building upon the great legacy of the Free National Movement, and after only 6 short months in office, he has announced a decision to amend the Immigration Act to permit all Bahamian women, single and men, to pass citizenship to their children born outside of the Bahamas. I'm confident that we would soon see the day of this inequity, that it would be addressed, and I am elated that my Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert Minnis, has chosen to address this issue very early in the term. The foreshadowed amendment is a great achievement and a tremendous step in the right direction. I believe Bahamian women are making progress with this move. I'm looking forward to the day when we return to this House for the passage of those amendments. I would also like to thank my Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Hubert A. Minnis, and the Minister of Social Services and Urban Development, Minister Lanisha Roll, for reposing confidence in my ability, in my leadership skills, as appointing me Deputy Director of Urban Renewal with responsibility for the Northern Bahamas, in particular Grand Bahama and Bimini. Urban Renewal's purpose is to restore our communities while addressing and combating many of the social ills in our society. Urban Renewal is the government's artery directly in the community that is used to pump life and give hope. We ensure the basic necessities of life are accessible and attainable to all. Urban Renewal will be working in conjunction with the Ministry of Grand Bahama, the Department of Social Services, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, NGOs, private citizens, schools, civic organizations, and the religious community. We will bring our ideas, skills, and strategy together to do our best to reduce and eliminate crime in our community, inclusive but not limited to etiquette classes, job placement programs, musical programs, skills and enhancement programs, after-school care, banking programs, girls mentorship programs, boys mentorship programs, sewing, let's read, straw weaving, basket making, and so much more. I want to affirm the Grand Bahamian community that Urban Renewal will take care of everyone in the various constituencies, regardless of color, belief, or political affiliation. And I want to repeat that. I affirm that the Grand Bahamian community will be taken care of in the various constituencies, regardless of color, political creed, or personal belief, for we exist to serve the Bahamian people. And this will be done in the mode of accountability and transparency as keeping with our government's mandate. The core objectives of Urban Renewal to prevent crime and reduce the fear of crime in the community, social ills, and urban decay, to identify and tackle the main causes of social conditions which promote the occurrence of crime and deviant behavior, to examine and improve the quality of life and social and environmental conditions, especially in high crime areas like over-the-hill communities, to involve the community in problem solving and empower citizens to play an active role in their communities, and also to identify the problems facing our youth and to engage them in positive activities, programs structured towards making them productive citizens. And when we come to this House, we want to address serious business, and I just would like to refer to Senator Colby Davis's comments, who so very passionately talked about the do's and the don'ts of governance in this country. I must say to Senator Davis that you are 5 years, 6 months, and 9 days too late. The advice given today should have been given to the PLP years ago. The reality is, the FNM is a reform government, and we have come to do the people's business, and we will do it differently. We are charged with a great task of which we readily accept. We did not expect thousands of contract workers, many of whom were not properly hired through the public system. We did not expect the gaming referendum, though the Bahamian people rejected it, but it was passed by the previous government. We did not expect parliamentarians to act outside of the rules and regulations of parliamentary procedure. So I want the senator to know today that this government have a manifesto, and we will be addressing those promises and making good on those to the Bahamian people of whom we swore to serve. Madam President, the DPP, the director makes prosecutorial decisions on a professional basis, independent of political influence or control. The director has complete independence in relation to the operations of his office, apart from the Attorney General's office and influence. In prosecuting matters, the Director of Public Prosecutions acts on behalf of the community. Prosecutors have strikingly been called ministers of justice, a phrase which sums up the unique position of the prosecutor in the criminal justice system. It has been said that prosecutors must always act with fairness and detachment with the objectives of establishing the whole truth and ensuring a fair trial. The Director of Public Prosecutions is not subject to the direction or control of any person, authority, or political organization. The DPP serves to further protect the integrity of the criminal justice system. Although the office does not have clients as such, in performing its functions, the office works closely with the courts, the legal profession, police, and other investigators, victims, representatives, and other government agencies. Here, we are creating a check and a balance in the judicial system, thereby nullifying the perversion of justice and major political influence. The Attorney General, who is an integral man, the Attorney General is a politician, he's a cabinet minister, and historically a policymaker. But we do not only speak in reference to our Attorney General, but moving forward, we are creating a buffer so as not to put the Attorney General in a precarious position when having to make unpopular decisions politically and socially. The Attorney General can now focus on policy and politics as opposed to prosecutions. Bahamians can now have restored faith in our justice system, that whether you are the Prime Minister, a member of Parliament, or one of the elite in our society, that justice will be fair for one and all. This creates a balance in place for generations moving forward, and in line with keeping with campaign promises of stamping out corruption in our judicial and governing system. I support the Constitution Amendment to establish the office and functions of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and I support the bill for the Amendment of Pension Act. Thank you.
As many?
Thank you very much, Madam President. I thank Almighty God for allowing me once again to stand in this honorable chamber to support this legendary piece of legislation to amend the Constitution of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to provide for the establishment of an office of an independent director of public prosecutions. I would like to thank the government for delivering on its promise made both in its manifesto and the speech that we from the throne. Madam President, I am happy to see that the government recognizes that the rule of law is critical to the maintenance of the people's trust in the exercise of public authority. The people's government has charted a course to bring about further transparency, and notice I said further transparency and accountability in the judicial system. I believe this amendment will help to remove the prevailing stigma of endemic corruption from our countries, both locally and internationally. The Bahamas, Madam Speaker, is a small nation, and the Attorney General nor any political appointee should not have the authority or the power to overturn the decision of the DPP without having to prove an explanation for his or her actions. Madam President, this was a long time coming. I can tell you that former Bar Association President and now Minister of State for Legal Affairs, the Honorable Ellsworth Johnson, along with the former Attorney General and Member of Parliament, Mr. Alfred Sayers, have been long-time advocates for the establishment of an independent director of public prosecution. Our own dear AG, member of the and leader for government business, also recognizes the need for such an amendment. I also had the opportunity, Madam President, to dialogue or to speak with our eminent senator, the Honorable Senator, opposition leader in this place, in this chamber, and he too had no fundamental differences with the bill. So everything seems to suggest that the bill is truly a timely one. Madam President, we are a step closer to a better Bahamas. You would note that in recent years, political appointees have determined the outcome of many cases in our system because of the authority given to them as the holder of the offices. The law is the law, Madam President. And again, I am delighted to see the amendment, will bring transparency and accountability to our judicial system. I speak especially for Family Islanders, Madam President, and Family Islanders are extremely pleased. I am also pleased that this amendment will solidify the position of the Family Island administrators. And we have a lot of administrators scattered throughout our Bahama Islands. He or she would be able to execute his or her duty without fear or favor. I recall a situation that occurred in one of the Family Islands a few months ago between a Family Island administrator and a sitting member of Parliament. It was alleged that the then Minister of the Government had advised the administrator to deal with a matter that was solely under the administrator's jurisdiction. It was unacceptable then, and it is still unacceptable now. Needless to say, Madam President, the matter reaches the court system. Even though the member of the government was vindicated by the court, it still left a bitter taste in the mouth of many Bahamians. We want to steer clear away from circumstances of those nature. And like the Bible says, we must shun the very appearance of what seems to be evil or unethical behavior. Recently in my travel, Family Island, Madam President, I ran into one of my past director. She lives in Long Island and her name is Mrs. Iris Spinder. Iris Spinder is now, has been retired for some time, but is enjoying life in the Family Island with integrity and doing what she wants to do. In the morning, she does her agriculture. In the evening, she tutors students from the high school in mathematics. When you look at the results of Long Island, when you look at the mathematics result, they are some of the work that Iris Spinder helps to maintain in Long Island. I salute her, and I want to let her know publicly that she's doing a wonderful job. She has one of the most flourishing garden in her yard, and backyard farming, and this is no small backyard farming. This is huge. And so Family Islanders are doing what they know to do with integrity. I hail Mrs. Spinder as a Bahamian, one of the Bahamian finest ladies. And she's an example of what persons can do, what life is like after retirement. On that note, Madam President, I support that part of the amendment, and I now turn to the pension amendment bill for 2017. I liken this Earth, planet Earth, Madam President, to a stage. And the dwellers living on this particular globe are actors or performers. Some of us perform well, and others tag along. Whether you tag along or whether you perform, the time will eventually come when you have to exit the stage. And persons would remember you, what you have done and how you exercise or how you presented yourself while you were on stage. In my humble opinion, Madam President, our former commissioner entered the stage and he was a focused individual from day one. Commissioner of Police, former commissioner that is, Mr. Elliston Greenslade, was a doer and performed exceptionally well in his duties. He served with integrity and with passion. He was passionate about what he did. The Bahamas was a better place because of this gentleman and this officer. He was leading at the helm for some years, and it appears that was something designed for him, and he enjoyed what he was doing. Technically, I called him a tweeter. He tweets the goodness of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and when an officer is down, he encourages them, and when they are up, he highlights them. I'm am excited about this move to this higher position as the Commissioner of the London, England. And I wish Mr. Greenslade every good wish in this venture. I am optimistic that he would do well in his new field. And I just like, in closing, I just like the word that he says. All the prime ministers have been very respectful to me. And I leave not because anyone is pushing me out, but because it's time to exit the stage, in my words. And so I thank him for his part in executing his duties in Bahama land. I support the pension bill, Amendment 2017. This amendment is another piece of progressive legislation, and it is my pleasure and my privilege to support this amendment highly. Thank you, Madam President.
As many. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell.
To win by one. No, don't, please. No, that's okay, I don't need it, no, yeah. There is, to speak first to the bill with regard to the question of an independent director of public prosecutions. There is a philosophical issue. And it is this. The assertion that there can in fact be an independent director of public prosecutions. My view is no such creature exists and can't happen. So if that's the premise from which we're starting, then we're starting from a false premise. And the other philosophical issue is whether or not the decisions with regard to prosecutions and the like ought to reside in a public servant as opposed to someone who is politically accountable to Parliament. And I believe in the latter. There is nothing that I see that has happened in this country that would cause us to have to pass this act to do what the government proposes needs to be done. In fact, what this bill does is largely codifies the practice which happens right now. Because although the public has this view that the Attorney General suddenly jumps up one day and says, oh, I'm setting so-and-so free, it doesn't happen that way. In fact, the Attorney General, more often than not, acts on advice. And we heard today the move of the motion say that he wishes to remove himself from that final bit so that he does not bear the legal responsibility for having made the decision to prosecute or to stop a prosecution or to take over a prosecution. I believe that ought to repose in the exact person it's in now, the Attorney General, the political creature in the Constitution as it exists today. And as I was explaining to one of your members, you can disagree with the discretion as it's exercised, but it is a complete discretion. And the Attorney General exercises it any way he or she wishes to do. You don't like it, or you like it. That's just the way it is. But the Attorney General is accountable to Parliament, to the court of public opinion. And that, to me, is sufficient. And because the mover said that a nollie does not prevent a prosecution from being brought back. In other words, it's an act which is committed without prejudice. Theoretically, his successor, if that successor finds that there is compelling evidence or reason to do so, can bring the matter back. There's nothing which prevents that either. So this bill then, as I said, codifies what is, in my view, existing practice, except for the removal of that last level. And I say this because there's an expression that the former Foreign Minister of Barbados used to use, which is you cannot approbate and reprobate at the same time. Another way of saying you can't give with one hand, or you shouldn't give with one hand and take with the next. And that's the way this bill is structured. Now, the government says that it is giving all of the powers, when you look at the bill, all of the powers which presently reside in Article 78 to the political Attorney General are now being transferred wholesale and without amendment to the new Director of Public Prosecutions. And so that is supposed to be that. If we are to have this, and I think they mean independent, not in terms of bias, I think they mean administratively independent. So the Director of Public Prosecutions is able to make the decision on his own, and that's that. But at the same time, the section of the bill gives the Attorney General the right to give general or specific directions in writing, and now we know they have to be gazetted, and these are supposed to be confined to public policy, to yes, public policy, national security, and international obligations. The interesting thing about public policy, of course, is public policy could mean anything in the world. So that isn't confining either. I mean, I think that you would, the Privy Council has already pronounced on this policy, public policy issue when in Ryan and the Attorney General in 1980, they said that the Nationality Act ran afoul of the law because public policy was so general you couldn't actually say what it was. So I assume they've now decided on this gazetting mechanism to get around that. But the point is, you shouldn't approbate and reprobate at the same time. So the next point is the question of tenure. And the point we make there is that if you are giving someone tenure, you just give them a term. The term is 10 years. I think the American government, for example, after J. Edgar Hoover, who you use today, was there for his lifetime appointment, they provided an amendment to the act so the now director of the FBI gets to serve for 10 years. And that's it, 10 years. So there's no, at the end of 5 years, you be a good boy, and then I reappoint you for 5 years. That's the issue with 2 5-year terms. If you're going to give someone a term, give that person a term, and the term comes to an end. He doesn't have to look for any favor. He doesn't have to sweeten any pot in order to get reappointed. In fact, the way the Constitution now has this rider where judges are, they retire at 65, but they have to write before their 65th birthday, and then they get to hold on for another 2 years. So that is a very odd provision. And so what I'm saying is you're setting yourself up structurally for a problem here with two 5-year terms. Now, what I'd also like to ask, and perhaps on the wind-up you can clarify, is what happens in the existing laws. I think most of the sexual offenses, the Public Disclosure Act says something has to be done with the fiat of the Attorney General. So what happens in those cases? Well, you can do it at the wind-up if you want to do so. Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
I thank the honorable leader opposite for yielding. I'd meant to raise it in my initial contribution, and I thought that since it's topical now, it's best to address it now. There are a whole slew of enactments that have terms requiring either the fiat of the Attorney General, meaning the old Latin word meaning do it, to commence certain prosecutions, or the consent of the Attorney General for something. So, for example, if there should be an unexplained death in a family island, and either it's thought that the existing administrator is not competent or whatever, or there is no administrator functionally on that island, then the consent of the Attorney General is granted to remove the inquest into that unexplained death to New Providence. So a lot of these things are being looked at. There was a bill drawn up in 2001, but a lot of other laws have been passed since then with the same consent. What will happen is between now and the promulgation of the constitutional amendment, should it pass, is that we've already commenced going through them, considering each one, and we will come with a bill early next year to effectively transfer most, if not all, of these matters, most of which are technical, to the DPP.
Right. I thank you for that explanation, because I figured there would have to be many, many consequential amendments to deal with this if you say, as the Attorney General still appears in the law. So I've said how we philosophically deal with this, what we think of it, and why, at the end of the day, the vote will be to support it, because we believe it does not change the existing practice. It, in fact, codifies what you do now. And the fact that you even add this bit about Gazette, well, I mean, as I was saying to my colleague here, if you depend on the Gazette to frighten you, the Gazette takes weeks and weeks after the act is passed before you even see it. And I don't know who reads the Gazette in these days. But I take the point that you're trying to put this in the public domain and make an explanation. My concern there would be, are you setting yourself up? And I know thus far the case law suggests that the discretion of the Attorney General is not reviewable, is not justiciable. But the moment you start giving reasons for things, the moment you start doing that, you're laying yourself open to judicial review. And I say, again, to come back to the fundamental premises, this is supposed to be an absolute discretion in the Attorney General. That's why you have the political authority deal with it. And it's not the only instance where this occurs in the Constitution. Because if you find this offensive, you must also find offensive, I would suggest, the powers which are given to the minister responsible for the prerogative of the Committee on the Prerogative of Mercy and the exercise of the prerogative. Because if you look at that provision in the Constitution, it gives the minister responsible for the prerogative the absolute say over whether someone should be pardoned, whether the record should be purged, whether they should be let out on jail. And even though there's a committee for the prerogative, when you read the rules, it says that the minister, in fact, makes the decision. Life and death decisions. It's a political authority that does it. And again, I say there's sound and sensible reasons, sound and sensible reasons for putting this in a political authority. Because the political authority is ultimately responsible to the people, and the people ultimately have their say over whether that authority should continue to exist or not. And I'm very leery of an attack, and I know it's politically convenient, since we've just come out of this election and everybody wants to revisit history and dredge up what so-and-so did and this and that. But we know you can go up, you can dig up many, many bones. I mean, the first time we heard about murder being a bailable offense was for someone who shot someone in the back, skipped bail. And then when the administration changed in 1992, got a nollie done by the then Attorney General. You could quarrel and argue about that. And of course, we took that to the political platform. And that's where it belongs, the political platform. Not taking away the discretion from the individual who is responsible for making the decision. There are sound reasons for that for that being done. And then, you know, we can duke it out across the table here as we are doing now. No, and I want to come back to that case if you want to revisit that case. You know, no, there was an argument. The member was just quoting from things that happened in Parliament. They raised it, they criticized the decision. No, there was a debate. There was a debate. Allegations were made. The answer was made that the acting minister said he made the decision in the resting on the rubric of national security, which is precisely one of the legs that the present practice says, or sorry, the new practice that you're putting in place is saying that you can rely on national security. So again, another example of why it's not new and why it's not different and why you in fact codifying the practice. No, the only difference is that you disagree with the decision. That's the issue. You disagree with the decision. And I say that there were sound and compelling reasons, and I think the F&M knows better. Sometimes, you know, Madam President, there are some things which neither of us should say or argue in the public domain. And we said from the start when this matter was raised in the other place by the side opposite, this was not an appropriate thing to bring into the public domain. Not an appropriate thing to do. Because there were compelling reasons, all kinds of reasons which we cannot state why an attorney general may have exercised a discretion. But even if you disagree with that, what I want the other side, or I wish the other side could concede, is that there are some things which simply do not belong in the public domain. Do not. That's why, for example, the public records have been sealed for 30 years. You wait until the bodies are dead and gone, so to speak, before you raise certain matters in public. That's the existing law. In the archives, things go. That is why cabinet decisions are what they are. You are sitting in cabinet. You're discussing things freely with your colleagues. Those are sealed from the public for a period of time for compelling reasons. Because when you're in the cabinet, you're supposed to be able to have a free exchange of information amongst your colleagues without other people looking over your shoulder to second guess what your most intimate thoughts are on policy. That's the argument. And similarly, it happens when the Attorney General exercises his or her discretion. So, in terms of the amendment which you offer, I would only say, be careful that you're not creating a situation where you are inviting the Looney Tunes from Grand Bahama to go to court and, you know, and review. Yes, right. No, I'm going to put it more specifically, right?
I think you should be careful.
Period. Yes, right. Okay. I won't. No, we know. You know, the lawyer who likes the vexatious litigant. Let me put it that way.
Vexatious litigating counsel.
Yes, I'm guided happily by vexatious litigating counsel, says the Attorney General, and I would draw and I would draw a Looney Tune. But the serious point is that you don't want to create jurisdiction which an authority or lay the foundation for making something which is justiciable, because it then creates a whole set of other problems. So that is our view on that. Secondly, Madam President, my colleague, Senator Jo Beth Davis, spoke about the way we, the public who are outside the walls and the halls of government, saw a narrative unfold post the 10th of May general election. And it goes something like this. There was all this din about fighting corruption, you know, corruption. And we got the impression that a case was being built up for Victor's justice, which subsequently unfolded. There was a statement made by the former Commissioner of Police, Ellison Greenslade, to one of the newspapers, and he said words to the effect, well, I don't see, a lot of talk about corruption, but nobody has formally complained. Then there was silence. And the next thing we saw was an acting commissioner was in place. And then 1, 2, 3 members of the PLP's former administration ended up before the courts on allegedly corruption charges. No sign of the Commissioner of Police substantively. A couple of weeks later, we then saw a note which was published that said, well, first of all, our members started asking questions. Where's the Commissioner of Police? Where's the Commissioner of Police? Where's the Commissioner of Police? A couple of weeks later, a note emerged. Commissioner of Police said, hi, fellas, my words, not his. I'm on holiday. I'm going to be on holiday for 3 weeks. Have fun. Obey the acting commissioner. He gave a date certain. The date certain came. We asked questions again. Where's the commissioner? Where's the commissioner? Where's the commissioner? I think the former prime minister intervened in the public domain and said, you shouldn't be treating the commissioner this way. We didn't know what that meant, but we saw the words. And then there was another note. Hi, fellas. I know I said I was coming back on vacation today, but I'm going back on vacation again. And he gave a date certain. The next thing I heard, he had reported to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the people were saying that he was going to be High Commissioner to London. So we put 2 and 2 together, and I guess that meant that the commissioner was leaving his office and taking a new post. Then we heard that there was a sticking point. The problem was that having served for the length of time that he served, he was unable to access the full pension as it was described by Senator Bethel in his intervention earlier today. And now we know the baton has been passed, and literally a baton was passed on the grounds of the barracks, one commissioner to the new commissioner. And I'm advised that the former commissioner is now safely ensconced in 11 Chesterfield House in Mayfield, which is the official residence of the High Commissioner. And given what we know about the way he's performed in his previous job as Commissioner of Police, he is likely to do a credible job in his new position. The issue then is not Ellison Greenslade per se, or himself. That's not the issue, him as a personality. And the issue is not for an individual to want to change his circumstances and take on a new job. The issue for us is, in the middle of what appeared to us to be a crisis on crime, the chief crime fighter of the country seems to have slipped away from the country and his job without explanation to the public and gone off to a new job. That's the issue. And that's not transparent. That's not transparent. My view is that one has to be careful how you offer or seem to offer public inducements to public officers to take various positions. And this has been a pattern because Bernard Bonamy, he'd been Commissioner of Police for a long time. Suddenly, he decided he wanted to go back to law school. Again, this was all done, no transparent, this or other thing, fine. He left, went back to law school, resigned as commissioner, passed the baton, and then I think he ultimately ended up being secretary to the gaming board. Another commissioner of police followed the same path that this present commissioner of police followed. Mr. Paul Farquharson, who resigned when became High Commissioner to London. Now, again, I'm not turning on the personalities. I'm saying that if you want a transparent way of dealing with this, the person should resign the office and then take up the other office. And there should be no inducement, no persuasion necessary for that individual to do so. None. None. No, I'm saying that the job, no, inducement. No, the word I'm using is inducement.
I'm saying, what about assistance?
And I'm not going to answer, I'm not on your program. I'm saying inducement. Inducement. You see? No, I have to. Because, you see, the reason I use the word is because your mantra since you've been in office has been corruption, corruption, corruption. That's what I'm saying. So you have to be careful what you're doing if you say you're against it. And, you know, he's a fine man. I mean, he's good, upstanding, good commissioner, has worked hard. No, I understand that. No. Sorry. We have a system that we're trying to protect. And we're in an argument about, and in a debate about the transparency of what, no, sorry. You know, everything is not as it seems. No, everything is not as it seems. It's often not as it seems. Let me put it that way. And then I have some, moving on from then, I want to also ask these secondary questions, if you may. The government, no, well, it's in the debate. It's in the debate. And there are issues which come with this debate and this piece of legislation. The government recently sent around a circular. The circular said to all permanent secretaries. And the circular said, I think it offered guidelines as to what is to happen when pensioners are rehired in the government service. Right. Right. And I think what they've done, or what you've done now, is reverted to the position pre-2012, which is that if someone is rehired who is a pensioner, that pension ceases so long as that person is working in the government service. The advice which we had gotten when we were in office is that was unlawful, that someone's pension is their entitlement, and that you cannot take away their pension entitlement, and you should not. That if you want to hire them, then you hire them. But you should not use that, taking away their pension away from them. And then the question is, you have two retirees who are sitting in the cabinet, if I'm advised properly, stand to be corrected. One is a former assistant commissioner of police, and the other is a police officer. I forget which rank he was that he retired on. So the question is, do these same rules, if I am correct, do these same rules apply to these two individuals that you are now saying must apply to these people who are coming back and rehired by the government? And then there are some sergeants, I understand, who are retirees of the police force, who have an issue about the collection of their gratuities, and have advised me that they're about to take an action in the courts because after many entreaties to the government, they are unable to collect a gratuity as retired sergeants. There should be no reason. And so that's why I'm raising these issues, and I'm also saying that I understand in connection with a member of parliament, a former member of parliament, there is one man who still has been unable to collect anything, I am advised, under the Parliamentary Pensions Act because he got caught up in the transition provisions between the abolition in 1989 and the present act. No, Galanis. Yes, right. I understand. And not only has he, what I'm advised is the egregious case is, well, that's why I'm raising it with you, because what I'm saying is, when you pass an act which appears to be specifically aimed at fixing up an individual, what you have then is many other people say, why aren't you doing it for me? Who are in lesser circumstances. Right. So I'm saying that you need to investigate these matters. And particularly since in the case of, and many people don't know this, the parliamentary pension is, you know, a contributory pension. And I'm advised he can't even get his contributions back. So that needs to be, that needs to be looked at and investigated. So, in principle, I see you've included the Commodore of the Defense Force, but clearly this was meant to be for the Commissioner of Police. I'm happy. I'm glad. I think the Commodore is probably happy that you thought of him also. But the Commissioner of Police, unlike the Commodore of the Defense Force, is a constitutional job. It's not a statutory position. And if the Royal Bahamas Police Force is as close as we can get to an army. And we see that armies can act in very strange ways. You know, one day I was traveling home with the former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham on an aircraft, and we landed at the then Paradise Island Airport. And so, as we looked out the window, he and I are sitting in the back seats together, we're looking out the window. So there comes the Commissioner of Police and his men in khaki, you know, right behind him. So I leaned over to him and I said, Prime Minister, looks like you got the whole crowd out here to meet you. He said, yes, they are. He says, but let me tell you something. If you don't see them when you land, put your hands together and pray. Now, that's a bit of humor, but what it tells you, because you've seen in other countries, there's one country in this region, Grenada, that actually had a complete meltdown. Right? So you can't say, because we have these British traditions in Westminster and all the rest of it, that it can't happen here. So we want to be sure that we act to make sure that our institutions are in fact run in a transparent manner and that these kinds of inducements as they appear are not necessary. And maybe you have to look at all the pension laws. For example, the question that's constantly asked is one of the greatest liabilities, Madam President, that this administration has, whether they know it or not. And I see where they say they're going to accrual accounting. So I hope they accrue this, which is that there are unfunded pension mandates which are piling high every year. That means that everybody who is hired by the public service makes no contribution to the pension, and the government has to pay. So at some point, you know, what the Social Services Commission, which was headed by, I think, Mr. Reverend Alfred Stewart, recommended to the government, and this is not rocket science, I think these recommendations are in the public domain a long time, is that at some point, the government has to move to a contributory pension. And given the way our contractual laws are, it probably means that you have to make that a requirement of new employees of the public service, and ultimately, the pension mandate will run down to zero over the years. For example, I think the recommendations were made in the early 2000s. If we had done it, you would have had 10 to 15 years, 16 years behind you of this, and you would really see the mandate running down, moving toward a contributory pension.
Yes.
And so all of that is part of the reform that has to take place. I am therefore, I'm therefore saying on both these bills that first, with regard to the pension, be careful that this does not appear to be an inducement. With regard to the bill on the DPP, that you are not creating problems for yourself by making something which is reviewable. And you know, with discretion, I'm watching what the government is doing on things like immigration very carefully. Very carefully. Very carefully. Yes. Yes. And I heard you loud and clear. I heard you loud and clear. Yes, I heard you loud and clear. You see, because that's again another issue where discretion is. You know, I was the minister. One man has a discretion as a minister, another man has a discretion. And I'm particularly concerned, Senator, about the fact that I've heard that a particular individual was taken off the restricted list and allowed back into this country in Grand Bahama. Particularly concerned about it, because there are compelling reasons why not.
I don't wish to.
The chair now recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you very much. I do not wish, please spell Rufa. I do not wish to have a legal argument or even a political argument. What I understand in regard to that is that there are instant legal proceedings that are being ventilated before a court of competent jurisdiction, I believe the Court of Appeal, that involve the persons, and they have a right to be present for the purposes of the presentation of their case. So I don't want to go any further than that. I don't want to have an argument. There was whatever the transactions were that brought things to the pass they reached, in my view, the matter being before a court of competent jurisdiction, they have the right to be present for that purpose. Thank you.
Right. I understood that would be the government's position. I respectfully disagree. It's civil litigation. The person does not need to be in the Bahamas for that. Does not. And that's my view. We have to take our security very seriously, and I just raised that as an issue. And so, Madam President, I thank you for this intervention. I think it's clear what our position is with regard to this. As I said, you can't reprobate and approbate at the same time, and be careful how you appear to create inducements when we are arguing in favor of transparency. So I thank you.
As many? Excuse me, David. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kwesi Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I do not intend to be very long with respect to these two pieces of legislation. I do though want to very quickly give two comments on two matters that occurred in Grand Bahama. First, I want to congratulate, Madam President, the Federation of International Female Lawyers, FIDA, who had a successful international conference. It was the 36th Triannual Conference, which was held at the Grand Lucayan, which attracted women lawyers from all over the world, from Africa, India, Sri Lanka, the United States, and of course, the Bahamas. Madam President, I want to also congratulate yourself on being one of the presenters at this conference, as well as, I believe,
Glennis Hannah Martin, who was also one of the presenters at the conference. I do also want to congratulate Ms. President Jethlyn Burrows, and I think she deserves for us to be to commend her, because out of this federation, this international federation, she serves as the international president of the federation. And as a result of her presidency, at the end of the presidency, wherever the president resides is where the conference would be held. So we want to congratulate her on being elected president of such a important organization, which is the Federation of International Female Lawyers. Madam President, I also want to, on the 9th and 10th of November, our office in Freeport in Grand Bahama had what we believe to be a very successful Grand Bahama Technology Summit. And Madam President, we had presenters from, I think it was about 22 presenters. There were some that came from New Providence. There were some that were from Freeport. There were a number that came from Silicon Valley, who had companies in Silicon Valley, and there were some who came out of New York. Notably, we had Dr. Gadrin Higgs, who is actually a native from Grand Bahama, who now is employed at Google. We had Ms. Christy Powell, who is a native from Nassau, and she is also employed at Google. We had representatives from Microsoft, representatives from HP, and a number of other number of other companies from Silicon Valley. But I want to, and I want us all to commend and to congratulate those Bahamians, because one of the things coming out of that technology conference was Bahamians are doing some very successful things in the technology world, and they are representing the Bahamas well all over the world in the technology field. And so I want to congratulate those Bahamians who came, and the reception that they got was not just that people were surprised that Bahamians have arrived at that sort of level, but there was a sense of pride that these are folks who came from the same place that we came from, and they have arrived at the top in their field. But Madam President, one of the important things that came out of the summit is that the government has pledged that we would make Grand Bahama a technology hub. And we believe that that is the direction upon which some emphasis needs to be put on in Grand Bahama. And that is one of the strategic plans that we have ahead for Grand Bahama. As a result of the summit, we have put together a steering committee, which will be announced very shortly. And that steering committees will have the purpose of putting together the point-by-point strategic plan on what we as a government must do, what the private sector must do, and how we make this technology hub plan a reality. We had over 500 persons who participated in the summit. It created a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. And one of the wonderful things about the summit is that people all across the Bahamas were talking about Grand Bahama with hope and with a future direction in terms of what opportunities are available for Grand Bahama to succeed. And that was really one of the positive things that came out of it, because a conversation across the country, I believe, that went beyond the challenges of Grand Bahama, but went into the opportunities of Grand Bahama. And so we believe that this is the right direction that we're heading in. We are going to continue to press to make this technology hub a reality. And that's one of the emphasis that we're going to continue to push in Grand Bahama. Madam President, to the two bills that are before us, with respect to the amendment to the Constitution Amendment Bill 2017. Again, there has been a lot said, so I will not belabor or I will not repeat, I think, what has been said. But I do want to say that this concept of having and I disagree. I disagree with Senator Mitchell in terms of that what is happening here has already been put in place, because I don't believe that's the emphasis. Because we can have an argument and a debate, a discussion on whether decisions in the past on both sides were politically motivated or not. And today is probably not the day to have that debate. But I think it goes beyond that in terms of not whether or not that has actually happened, but it is putting in place a system that will give the proper transparency when the public looks at this issue. Because will it stop political interference? It may not. But what is required is that we put in place a system to prevent it. And that is what this bill seeks to do. It seeks to provide the public with the assurance that when I look at my system, when I look at what is in place, there are things in place to prevent political interference. And that's the point, I believe, where the emphasis should be on, not whether there was political interference or not, and whether we are doing this because there was political interference. No, we are doing this because we need a system which gives the public the assurance of transparency and gives the public the assurance that there should not be, there ought not be, and we are doing our best to prevent there from being political interference when it comes to the decision-making process on whether someone is prosecuted or not. When we look at senior persons in our jurisdiction, in 2015, the Bahamas Bar Association had a symposium, and it was even participated by our Attorney General. And one of the quotes coming out of that was from the then Justice Stephen Isaacs, who I believe is now the acting Chief Justice. And he said these words: if the DPP is independent, it removes the Attorney General, who is a politician, a cabinet minister, and historically a policymaker who sits in the Senate. It creates a buffer against those decisions that the Attorney General is now required to make, that they may be unpopular politically, unpopular socially, and the Attorney General can then focus on the policy and politics as opposed to prosecutions. And I think that's important, because the Attorney General should be focused on the policy and the politics side of it, and we should allow the DPP to be focused on the prosecution side of it. But even beyond what Justice Stephen Isaacs said, in 2013 there was a Bahamas Constitutional Commission that was set up. It was headed by Sean McSweeney, and also by our Attorney General, Carl Bethel. And number 54 recommendation, the 54th recommendation of that commission was, and I quote their 54th recommendation, the commission supports the recommendation to remove the responsibility for criminal prosecutions from the political attorney general and transfer it to the director of public prosecutions with constitutional autonomy and independence. Further, the proposed amendment creating the office of DPP should be entrenched. So the commission itself, the 2013 commission, recommended that we do what we are doing here today. And that was made up of a wide variety of persons, attorneys, community leaders, who sat down, went across the country, and came up with these recommendations as to changes that should have been made to the Constitution. So we're doing one of the recommendations that they have put forward. The OAS, Organization of American States report on the Bahamas, and they have a report, and the report is the implementation of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. They came in, had conversations, talks with the Attorney General's office, and this was done in March of 2015. And they made a number of recommendations, but one recommendation in particular, and I want to quote what they said. The committee believes that the country under review should continue to consider establishing measures that help entrench an independent prosecutorial service, one that is not under the direction or control of an attorney general, subject to its constitution and the fundamental principles of its legal system. Such measures may also include measures that do not require constitutional action, such as, and this is one of the points that I thought was interesting, such as establishing guidelines that safeguard the perception of prosecutorial independence, such as establishing perimeters on when the Attorney General is to be consulted on important matters of general interest, which should be published online and in the official Gazette of the Bahamas in order to promote transparency in the process. And if the Attorney General does intervene, he may do so but through written directives to the Director of Public Prosecutions. So one of the points that was raised was, well, you know, why put it in the official Gazette if the official Gazette isn't going to come out for months? And then one of the other points that was raised by senators on the other side was that, well, there still is some control that the Attorney General is going to have over the DPP. Well, when we look at what was actually recommended by the OAS, they recommended the same things that are in the bill. They recommended that if the Attorney General is going to intervene, then it should be made public. It should be put in the Gazette, because that adds a degree of transparency to the process. That if you are going to make recommendations, then you ought to be able to stand up and put those things in the public domain. I heard Senator Mitchell ask the question whether or not we want to put some of those things in the public domain because it may add to someone litigating on it, and it may add to judicial review. Well, my question would be, maybe we ought to do that. Maybe it should be open to, because if the Attorney General is going to go to the extent that he is going to intervene in a matter where the DPP is supposed to be independent, and if he's going to intervene in a matter where this person should be independent, then it should be of sufficient reasons, and it should be of, he should sufficiently be able to justify it to the point where it may be questioned, to the point where it may be looked at, to the point where people ought to see it. That is, in my view, transparency. And that is, in my view, where governments all across, democratic governments all across the world are heading in directions, in the direction where they are being more open, in the direction of where, when you make decisions, the public ought to be able to question those decisions. The public ought to be able to see the reasoning behind those decisions. And that is where I believe this government is, where the spirit of what this government is doing, which is a spirit of transparency, a spirit of openness, and a spirit of where the public ought to be given the sufficient information about what is being done. So, Madam President, I believe that this will add to trust. And that's one of the foundations of the Free National Movement, is that we should be doing things and setting up systems where the public trust can be restored. And so this is not, I believe, just an ordinary amendment, but it is a significant amendment to where it begins to restore that trust back into government. And that is one of the things that I believe has been lost over the years, is that the public has lost confidence. The public has lost trust. And the only way I believe that we are going to be able to restore that trust back in governance is that we set in place systems that will make politicians uncomfortable. It will make us uncomfortable in certain circumstances. But it is what the public, I believe, expects of us. And that's the only way we're going to be able to restore the trust back in governance. Madam President, on the next pensions bill, again, I don't have a lot to add to the pensions amendment bill. I, again, like others, have commended the former Commissioner of Police. And, you know, one of the points that has been raised is, you know, whether or not there was some undue influence, or whether or not there was some pressure, or one of the words that was used was some inducement, and so on. But, Madam President, I believe both sides have commended the Commissioner of Police. Both sides have said that this is a good man. Both sides have said that he has performed his duty with integrity, and both sides have said that he has performed his duty at high standards. Well, I accept that. And in anyone who I believe has integrity and has high standards, well, I accept their word too. So I accept him at his word when he says he was not forced to do anything. I accept him at his word when he says that he's done this on his own free will. And so I commend him. I commend him for the work that he has done, and I believe and expect that he will continue to perform a good service for the country in another capacity. And so, Madam President, with those hopefully few words, I support both bills before the Senate. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jenny Dotson.
Madam President, I stand today in this honorable place to salute all Bahamian women and ask the entire country to celebrate National Women's Week, which will be held from November 26th to December 2nd, under the theme, Strong Women, Strong Families, Strong Communities. We will also be celebrating the 55th anniversary of the enfranchisement of women in the Bahamas. And we all know that women are the foundation of this country upon which we live in. Madam President, I am pleased to speak to this historic bill, which will amend Article 78, which is not entrenched, of the Bahamas Constitution to provide for the creation of the office of an independent director of public prosecutions. Specifically, the bill will amend the Constitution to allow for the establishment of an independent office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Madam President, further, the bill will strengthen democracy in the Bahamas and move forward justice, rights, and freedoms of all Bahamians. This bill will provide for the much-needed reformation and modernization of systems, along with accountability and transparency in government. Additionally, in areas such as developing policies, awarding contracts, dealing with corruption, providing incentives for investors, finance, and the delivery of services in the public service. The creation of this independent Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Office will remove the political influence and further enhance the rule of law in the Bahamas. Madam President, this legislation, which is long overdue, brings the Bahamas in line with our Caribbean counterparts and other countries who already have an independent Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Therefore, it is in keeping with international standards and norms, regionally and internationally. The benefit of creating the Office of DPP is that all of the power that the Attorney General had in the past as it pertains to criminal prosecution will now be vested in this office. The Office of the Department, DPP, will not be answerable or accountable to Parliament. Section 78A(3), Madam President, says that the Director of Public Prosecutions shall have the power in any case in which he considers it desirable to do so, to institute and undertake criminal proceedings against any person before any court in respect of any offense against the law of the Bahamas, to take over and continue any such criminal proceedings that may have been instituted by any other person or authority, and to discontinue at any stage before judgment is delivered any such criminal proceedings instituted or undertaking by himself or any other person or authority. Madam President, it has been argued that the bill will not give the Director of Public Prosecutions complete freedom from interference from the Attorney General. However, it allows the Attorney General to give definite directions to the Director of Public Prosecutions in any matter involving public policy, national security, or international obligations of the Bahamas. These instructions from the Attorney General to the Director of Public Prosecutions will be in writing, signed by the Attorney General, and the same gazetted. And the question has been raised as to whether or not this will leave the Attorney General open to judicial review. And as Senator Thompson has already said, we are living in a digital age now, and Bahamians are much more aware of what is happening, and they expect that transparency and accountability will be the order of the day. So if the Attorney General makes a decision, then he must be able to defend that decision and to stand up and to be able to defend himself in a judicial review. This legislation would make it so that the Attorney General can be consulted on matters related to nolle prosequi. In essence, the bill will allow for civil prosecutions to be under the purview of the Attorney General and criminal prosecutions by the Director of Public Prosecutions. Madam President, under the former administration, it was nolle this and nolle that. Nolle prosequi was the order of the day for the former government. Nolles were granted for no reason at all, and none was given. For example, the nolle for a former client of the former Attorney General This contentious example was issued on national security grounds, occurred in 2013 under the former administration, when the former education minister issued a nolle prosequi for former clients of the then Attorney General while he was acting as Attorney General in her absence. The former Attorney General represented the clients who were charged with possession of an illegal firearm and ammunition until she was appointed as Attorney General in May 2012, when she did not represent them. Madam President, notably for the trade union movement, the nolle prosequi issued by the former Attorney General to discontinue court proceedings against the Sandals Royal Bahamian Resort and two of its senior executives was a slap in our faces. The very same day that the nolle was issued, the Cable Beach Resort terminated nearly 600 workers to facilitate a $4 million renovation. It was felt by many Bahamians at the time that the former government was in collusion with the owners of Sandals. Instead of allowing the judicial process to proceed, the former Attorney General squashed the dreams and hopes of Bahamian workers by issuing the nolle. The nolle stopped in its tracks the case against Sandals' then general manager and financial controller by 5 officers of the Bahamas Hotel Managerial and Allied Workers Union, who had alleged that Sandals Royal Bahamian was in breach
collusion point.
of the Industrial Relations Act by failing and refusing to treat or enter into negotiations.
Could, Senator, the point of order for Senator Mitchell.
Yeah, I just want to make the point here. Is the allegation being made that the former Attorney General was in collusion with Sandals? Is that what you mean? Well, no, I mean, because appears or not, that's what the bedrock of the allegation is. And there's no evidence of any collusion between the Attorney General. What I keep saying, Madam President, is a discretion in law is a discretion.
No, sorry, Madam President, may I answer this, please?
Recognize the Senator, the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Yes, it is a discretion.
Yes.
However, no discretion is above public scrutiny.
That's not what we are.
No, we are arguing that because a decision was made by the former Attorney General, which in its circumstances offended a group. That's the point, and they have formed the view that she may have been influenced by other people's views. It doesn't matter. It was her absolute discretion, undoubtedly.
Okay, senators,
Undoubtedly.
senators,
Discretion.
would you please take your seat? Senator Dotson, let's just be guided, and perhaps you would want to not use that word.
I said it was felt. What
Okay.
does the word felt mean? It just didn't mean that it is concrete. So come
Okay.
on, we don't need to jump up here and stand up here when it was
Okay.
felt by the Bahamian people that they felt certain things.
Okay.
Now, whether or not it was true or not, that is left to be determined.
I will not allow it. I will not allow it, Senator. Senator Dotson, please move on.
Thank you. By making the workers at Sandals redundant in order to conduct improvements at the resort, the union charged that by doing so, the hotel had engaged in union busting. Obie Ferguson, president of the Commonwealth Trade Union Congress, said that what he thinks, I think the Attorney General owes the workers of the Bahamas an apology and the union for the effect of what she has done. The Attorney General doesn't think you have the right to go to court and the man committed a criminal offense. The Commonwealth Bahamas Trade Union Congress is still expecting the people's government to resolve the Sandals matter and have
Please.
suggested ways to do the same.
Excuse me, Senator, could I just take, we really need to be very careful, and allege might have been a right word to insert in there, but senators, please, we've already had a few discussions earlier as it relates to our language, and we have to be careful. So I would ask you to either include alleged, Senator Dotson, or withdraw that comment.
Madam President, I said Obie Ferguson said, I think, or I allege, Is that what suits the
It would be
Honorable
more, it
House?
would be more appropriate.
Allege that the AG owes the workers of the Bahamas an apology. So what is the issue? What is the issue?
Yeah, I think we were, you're talking about the sandals person.
Yeah. No, I did not. I never said that. Where did I say that? I never said he committed an offense. No, I never did.
Again, if you're not, if you're quoting from the newspaper, you should have that newspaper here. You have to adopt those words to be your own. But we really do
Saying
need
what
to be
Oprah
careful.
Ferguson said.
But you can't.
All right, the Commonwealth Bahamas Trade Union Congress, as I said, is still expecting the people's government to resolve the sandals matter and have suggested ways to do the same. There are many other knowledge I can mention, but make note of the following, but it will just take me too long to expand on these. The trade union movement expects that the government will address the many issues being experienced, such as the failure of employers to meet and treat, the failure of employers to adhere to and follow signed and registered industrial agreements of various trade unions, and the failure of employers to follow the labor laws of the Bahamas. The trade union movement expects to be engaged in social dialogue, to be treated as a partner and not an adversary in the workplace. It is only through disagreements will we learn to agree. We have too many employers who are afraid of unions and executives who stand up and speak out on issues and their failures in administration. However, I wish to remind the Bahamian public that it is on the foundation that the trade union movement laid that we now celebrate and enjoy many of the liberties we now enjoy today in our country. Solidarity forever. We'll always keep us. You want to sing it? You can start it, raise it. Raise it for us. The Honorable Senator Davis has raised some concerns that she has in relation to citizenship, pay increase for parliamentarians. But I suggest to her to wait until those bills are actually tabled. But I'm sure that the government is quite aware of the many concerns expressed already by the general public and the opposition. In conclusion, Madam President, I stand to fully support the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2017, a bill for an act to amend the Constitution to provide for the establishment of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and for matters connected thereto, and the Pension Amendments Bill. Thank you.
As many? Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Madam President. It's my distinguished pleasure to give some wrap-up remarks in this matter, and an honor, and a privilege. I think I should start by just a short history lesson. The Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General is a high constitutional office which precedes and predates even the concept of a constitution, predates the Magna Carta. It's from the 12th century. The king's lawyer was appointed, the first king's lawyers. No, not quite from the conquest, but certainly within 100 years after the conquest, the kings determined that he needed to have a lawyer to deal with. 1066 was the date of the Battle of Hastings and the conquest, but of Britain by the Normans. But because the Attorney General, the king's lawyer, exercised the power of the king, the Attorney General is clothed he's unique in offices of the crown. He's clothed in the royal prerogative, so far as relates to the power to enter or discontinue criminal matters. It's a unique office. The king has the prerogative to pardon, and through that royal prerogative, the Attorney General exercised the powers we now call the right to issue a fiat, to start an action, if necessary by order, the right to issue a nolle prosequi, to discontinue an action by order. These are prerogative rights vested in the office of the Attorney General. So, no, that's vested in the prerogative of mercy committee, but of which the Attorney General is a constitutional member of the Committee of the Prerogative of Mercy, in virtue of his prerogative powers historically. Now, we've been accused of approbating and reprobating, and ain't nothing changed. Notwithstanding that we have bent over backwards to ensure that any direction given should be public, disclosed, gazetted. So we have to look at the nature now of the two roles to really understand what's going on. As I said, the Attorney General has his historic function. Can that be conferred? Let's start from this basic premise. Nowhere in the existing Constitution are the words nolle prosequi used, or fiat. Okay, it's the power to commence or discontinue. The right to issue these ancient writs is a prerogative right of the Attorney General. Can that prerogative right be conferred or transferred to someone whose only power is derived from the Constitution? The answer was definitively ruled to be no by the Privy Council. Bear this in mind. The Attorney General in the modern Bahamas gets his right under the Constitution, but also from the royal prerogative, which he and the persons, he or she, who have stood in this office have exercised going back to the 12th century. That is the difference. So in amending this Constitution to give independence and to separate the prosecutorial function from that of the Attorney General, in terms of the day-to-day operations of it, the only right that the DPP has is one under the Constitution as amended. And therefore, the Privy Council ruled in the Mohit against DPP case, a case arising out of Mauritius, where the DPP had issued a nolle prosequi to prevent a litigant suing our former minister for corruption in the criminal courts. And the Privy Council ruled against the DPP and sent it back and said the DPP had to give an account, but if he gave reasons, those reasons could be reviewable. It is not what the Attorney General does that is reviewable, is what the DPP does that could well, under Mohit, be reviewable. No. Your point went to any directions that the Attorney General gives. The Attorney General has the prerogative right, which is preserved, to give general or specific directions. But it cannot be questioned in court. It can be publicized, it can be made, it can be debated once reasons are given, if reasons are given. When it is gazetted, it can be debated, but it can't be challenged. Whereas what the DPP does could possibly, what the DPP does in his own deliberate discretion, having regard to the Mohit case, could well be the subject of judicial review. That is what they ruled, and perhaps I should just very quickly read Here's what the Privy Council said. The DPP, in the opinion of the board, cannot rely on the immunity enjoyed, at any rate in the past, by the English Attorney General when exercising the prerogative power to enter a nolle prosequi, since he is not the Attorney General. He is not, like the Attorney General, answerable to Parliament. Remember the emphasis I placed upon being responsible and therefore accountable to the people through Parliament? Okay. The whole Commonwealth has adopted this model, sir, and it has not caused any kind of constitutional disruption. Okay? Okay. If you are afraid, sir, of one lawyer, that's your business. This Attorney General is not afraid of one lawyer, no matter how many times he comes at the government. We stand by the integrity of what we do and will defend whatever we do in court, which is the proper forum. No problem. Now, if I may continue, I am not going to be running for no one attorney. And I will not advise or counsel my colleagues to shape public policy based on some fear of one attorney. We don't operate that way. And he's my good friend, and sometimes he likes me, and sometimes he's angry with me. And I take the good with the bad, okay? Because I don't catch feelings like that. Okay. Now, so I finished talking to you on as a Bahamian. I don't catch the feelings. We'll move on. I don't catch feelings. Okay. So the DPP is not, like the Attorney General, answerable to Parliament. He has no prerogative power. His power derives from the Constitution, and the Constitution does not use the language of nolle prosequi. The power expressly conferred on the Procurator General, that's the equivalent in Mauritius, to enter a nolle prosequi has never by that name been conferred on the DPP. So, the court then went on and stated that the judgments of the court below should be set aside. The evidence will include any reasons why the DPP may choose to give, but it is for the DPP to decide whether reasons should be given, and if reasons are given, how full those reasons should be. The English authorities cited above show that there is, in the ordinary way, no legal obligation on the DPP to give reasons, and no legal rule, if reasons are given, governing their form or content. This is a matter for the judgment of whether he gives reasons for what he does. Okay? Right. The Attorney General said so. The Attorney General will say so by publishing it in the Gazette. Okay. Okay. This is a matter for the judgment of the DPP. The Attorney General has prerogative rights. And when he gives a direction, even though it is publicized, it is an exercise of his prerogative right and his right under the Constitution. And therefore, that is not, and still will not be subject to question. Look at what happened with the issues argued about the immediate past Attorney General. Whether you like it or not, the former Attorney General, since there have been many others, I'll specify, I don't want to call names, the one who sat right here in the last session of Parliament. There have been a number of issues where, in 2 issues, there have been matters of public controversy. But nobody can question that whether you like it or not, whether you think she acted from the proper motives or not, That is her right under the Constitution. The point being that the Attorney General still has that right, but unlike those who will sweep it under the carpet and not allow the matter to be properly investigated, you know, I heard you all talk about, oh, we debated in Parliament. It was supposed to be a full debate on that one topic. When there was an allegation made against a former FNM Attorney General about someone you said who skipped bail, okay, we had a full day to debate it. It was a matter that was thoroughly ventilated. With the Hales matter in that other place, that was a matter that incidentally arose. There were exchanges. The first time it was raised, the then Prime Minister promised to show the file to the Leader of the Opposition. When the Leader of the Opposition said he proposed to look at it, but he's not a lawyer, he wants Carl Bethel to look at it with him, the file was withdrawn. That was the pretext. And that was all said on the floor of Parliament. That was all, no. The Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, said all of this on the floor of the House of, that other place, the House of Assembly. That's the reality, okay? Under what we are getting rid of is the ability of a government to, you quoted Eddie Minnis on public disclosure early on, leader of opposition business. There's another line in that song, that world famous Oh Mr. MP song, the public disclosure song, dog like road and cat like sand. They had plenty cat over there. Very good at burying things. That's what they did. This amendment, yes, it enshrines a prerogative because this Attorney General will remain responsible and accountable to Parliament. And any successor Attorney General will be accountable to Parliament. But what it changes is this, that no bunch of cats could hide no stuff down in no sand no more. It has to be public, it has to be transparent, it has to be open, it has to be known, and it has to be in a position where everyone can form a public view on the matter. That is what is going to happen. And that is the value that is the value of all of what we do today. What we are doing today is we are bringing the exercise of power out of the darkness and into the marvelous light of public scrutiny and transparency. Power to the people. It's the people's time. And in this, we vindicate the people and their right to know and their right to be assured that there are no secret dealings going on or underhanded dealings affecting critical decisions, such as whether to commence or whether to discontinue prosecutions. There have been, in the history of the Free National Movement, some very, very, very troubling instances where when we were in that long and bitter and dark night of opposition to the monolithic Pinling regime, when leaders in our party, leading voices on behalf of our party, young radical leaders were targeted and charged with sedition, criminal libel, Lionel Dossett, sedition, Rodney Munker, yes, Desmond Edwards was charged. Desmond Edwards charged.
No, you was never charged.
We had a demonstration on the bridge, and the entire leadership of the Free National Movement, Cecil Wallace Whitfield, Janet Boswick, Henry Boswick, Orville Turnquest, they line them off and issue and summon them to court. The former PLP government. Yes, every last one. Okay? After we went and stormed Paradise Island Bridge, because we were complaining that certain, no, it was a public road and still is. We did not go through the barricades, but we knew that certain persons had sold the bridge and gotten a finder's fee, and we knew from the Commission of Inquiry that got split up. That got split up. That got split up.
Senators. Okay, senators, let's try to get through this debate, please, and stick to the subject matter at hand.
The point being, though, when you see FNMs get a little passionate about these decisions, I want the Bahamian people to be reminded that the Free National Movement in opposition was oppressed by the decisions taken about who to prosecute for just exercising their basic rights of free speech in this country. And the entire leadership of our party got summoned to go before a magistrate outfit on charges of unlawful assembly and foolishness like that. No, that's our history. It shows the abuse of the prosecutorial power. And the church, while the martyrdom of the early church leaders caused them to become the world's largest and most powerful religious denomination, because of the martyrdom of those, they still condemn the martyrdom, those who martyred their leaders. And we condemn those who abuse the prosecutorial power in order to preserve their political position. And this is what this amendment is aimed to correct. But at the end of the day, as I say, the Director of Public Prosecutions will have the absolute right in the Constitution to commence or discontinue any matter without reference to anybody. Now, the point about public interest. Stroud's Judicial Dictionary gives guidance on what the public interest is. I understand my friend opposite was saying how, it could mean anything. Well, actually, it doesn't. The words public interest have been judicially defined to include anything that would affect the pecuniary or interests of any sort of the public, anything that the public have a legitimate interest in. It includes the concept that justice must not only be done, but be seen to be done. Okay? There are clearly defined legal concepts of what the words the public interest means. Anyway. So the point being, Madam President, that these words are capable of definition. What they are not capable of, though, under the regime that will be... When these guys are finished with this love fest, I'll finish the sentence.
Family man. Interruption.
What the words public interest, national security, and the international obligations of the Bahamas will not be capable of under the coming regime is abuse. It will not be possible to abuse these words, to use these words in a way that abuses the intent, because the transparency provisions will bring that which was in darkness into the marvelous light of public scrutiny. Amen. And on that note, Madam President, I now move that this bill, a bill for an act to amend the Constitution to provide for the establishment of the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and for matters connected thereto, that this bill be read a second time and committed. If I may obtain a second.
Madam President, I second.
No. That's it. Yeah, just formalize it. Okay.
As many are in favor of the bill being read a second time would say aye. Those opposed, nay. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed. Further second readings?
Well, should we not do the committal? No, because you have to do it. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Okay. Yeah. No, I have it here somewhere, I think. I had it here. A bill to an...
There you go.
I have it. Madam President, I beg leave to move for the second reading and committal of a bill for an act to amend the Pensions Act. If I may obtain a seconder.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed, a bill for an act to amend the Pensions Act. As many are in favor that the bill be read a second time will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed. Further second readings?
No further second readings, Madam President. Madam President, I now move that the this Senate do, well, it is a House of Parliament, but I understand. I move that this Senate do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole and that the Vice President take the chair.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair. As many are in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate will now resolve itself into the committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair.
So you said, they said no. Okay. Put it on you.
Committee of the whole.
Madam Vice President, Madam Chairman, I move that this House to approve the long title of the bill, which is a bill for an act to amend the Constitution to provide for the establishment of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and for matters connected thereto. If I may obtain a second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act for the
That the long title be approved. The long title be agreed.
that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I wish to move an amendment. I beg leave to move the following amendment to the long title of the bill.
Yeah.
Immediately after the word Constitution, insert the words of the Bahamas, with the remaining of the words in the long title being unchanged.
Second.
As many? Sorry, second. As many?
It's been moved and seconded
Okay.
that the amendment to the long title.
Now, where is that written?
Agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendment to the long title of the amendment be agreed. As many?
As many ayes in favor.
As many are as in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The long title is amended as agreed.
Madam Chairman, I now move that the short title and commencement be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title and commencement be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The short title and commencement are agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I now move that clauses 2, 3. Oh, okay. Okay, clause 2 of the bill be agreed. Clause 2 only.
Madam Chair. Second.
As many? It has been moved and seconded that the short title, that clause 2, be agreed. As many as are in favor, aye.
Aye.
As many as opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Short title is agreed. Clause 2, sorry.
Madam Chairman, I beg to move that clause 3 of the bill be agreed, if I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
As many? Oh, God. It has been moved and seconded that clause 3 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Yes,
No?
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to clause 3 in paragraph 4 of the proposed new Article 78. Delete the words writing and signed by the Attorney General and substitute the words writing signed by the Attorney General and published in the Gazette. This amendment, Madam Chair, provides specific directions given to the Director of Public Prosecutions by the Attorney General are to be published in the Gazette for public information. I so move.
No, this
This
is,
is the amendment here, that the words, these words would read writing, signed by the Attorney General, and substituted by writing, signed by the Attorney General.
and published in the Gazette. Amendments here? Amendments to be made in paragraph 4 of the proposed new Article 78. We shall delete the words writing and signed by the Attorney General and substitute the words writing, signed by the Attorney General, and published in the Gazette. As many? Second. No? As many? As many as are agreed to the amendment. All of those in favor? Remain. Those opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed.
And the amendment 3 because, see, no, you see, it's clause 3, so the amendment 78, so Article 78, 4. So the amendment to Article 78, 4 is agreed, so that
The amendment to Article 78, proposed Article 78, 4, number 4 is agreed.
Right. Good, okay. No. Madam, no, 4 and 5. Madam President, I beg leave to move that clauses 4 and 5 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 4 and 5 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. Clause 4 and 5 are agreed.
Madam Chairman, I beg to move that the constitutional amendment bill as a whole be agreed, as amended.
It has been moved and seconded that the constitutional bill as amended be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The constitutional bill as amended has been agreed.
Any further words? Did I just start up? Okay. Madam Chairman, I beg to move that the long title of a bill for an act to amend the Pensions Act be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill to amend, that the long title of the pension bill be agreed. As many as are in favor? As are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The long title is agreed.
Madam President, I beg leave to move the amendment, I beg leave to move that the short title and commencement be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Aye. The ayes have it. The short title is agreed.
Madam President, I beg to move that sections 2 and 3, clauses 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The clause 2 and 3 has been agreed.
Madam Chairman, I move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many? Aye. Those as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill is in entirety has been agreed.
Madam Chairman, I move that the Honorable Madam President do take the chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the Honorable Chairman, President of the Senate, do now take the chair. As many as are in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Madam President will now take the chair.
I just happen to underpin them that water well.
Madam President, I beg leave to report that the committee has gone through the two bills, having made amendments to each one, to the constitutional amendment bill, and it has been approved. Honorable Senators, the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has gone through the bills having made one amendment, and that any directions to the Director of Public Prosecution shall be in writing, signed by the AG and gazetted. Third reading and passing of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the third reading and passage of the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2017 as amended.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to amend the Constitution of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to provide for the establishment of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution and for matters connected thereto. As many are in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be the Constitution Amendment Act 2017. Further third readings and passing of bills.
That coming next week, man. We're working on Grand Bahama hard. Madam President, I beg leave to move that the Pensions Amendment Act 2017 be read a third time and passed. If I obtain a seconder.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to amend the Pensions Act. As many are in favor would say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Pensions Amendment Act 2017. Further third readings?
There are no further third readings, Madam President.
Order that the clerk do now take the two bills passed today to the Honorable House of Assembly and inform members that the Senate had consented to the same with amendments. Okay. Consideration of House amendments, resolutions, Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. Orders for the clerk.
Sorry, notices.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, at the next sitting of the Senate, I'll ask the following questions. Will the government say, what is the policy with regard to work of members of this place at public corporations? Will the government update us on the status of the Foxville Community Center and its obligations to that center, having regard to the fact that the electricity supply to the center was disconnected by Bahamas Power and Light on the 16th of November 2017? And will the government say what is the policy with regard to the payment of pensions and salaries to those cabinet ministers who've retired from the public service and now serve in the cabinet?
I could answer the second question right now, you know. If whoever has the documents for the Foxville Community Center would provide them to my office so that we can do what is necessary to complete the absolutely necessary leasing of the property pursuant to the terms of the IDB facility, I'm sure you wouldn't have a problem of the electricity being cut off. But no, but you want the answer I'm giving you. If and when we receive the documentation that enables us to prepare a lease to comply with the terms of the IDB lending, then all of these matters will fall in place. Unless and until that should happen, our hands are tied.
No, we are not.
Just watch your answer now.
Excuse me. Senators, at this time,
Nobody
we
has
are,
the right to do anything to that.
Senator,
building.
could you please be
Except the
seated?
Foxhill Community Center, who has the
Senator.
the non-profit company in which it's vested.
You did. And that is it. Adjournment.
Madam President, I move that the business of this Senate to adjourn sine die.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate do adjourn sine die. As many are in favor would say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The business of the House Senate is adjourned sine die.
Yes. Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Final vote.